I was on duty patrolling the east side of Riverdale County when my phone rang. It was Jamie, my sanctuary manager. "Sheriff Mike. You need to get back here right now. Some people claiming to be health inspectors just showed up with a woman from the HOA. They've padlocked all the gates to your animal sanctuary." Jamie's voice was shaking. "What? Who authorized this?" I gripped my steering wheel tighter. "Some woman named Karen Williams. She's got papers saying your sanctuary violates health codes. They won't let me in to feed any of the animals or give medication to Shadow. They've put chains on everything. I'm coming right now." I hit my lights and made a U-turn. My mind raced as I sped down the highway. Shadow was my blind therapy dog who needed seizure medication every 6 hours. We also had 3 severely malnourished horses we just rescued last week. They wouldn't survive without proper care. Karen Williams had been a thorn in my side since becoming HOA president of the new luxury development next to my property. She'd been filing complaints about my animal sanctuary for months, saying it lowered property values. What she didn't know was that she wasn't messing with just anyone. I'm Michael Townsend, county sheriff for the past 12 years, and those animals weren't just pets, many were evidence in ongoing abuse cases. Karen had made a serious mistake, and she had no idea who she was really dealing with. Before diving into the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. I pressed the gas pedal harder as memories of why my sanctuary existed flashed through my mind. 7 years ago, I'd led a raid on an illegal dogfighting ring hidden in the woods of Riverdale County. Behind the property, chained to a rotting post, I discovered a skeletal horse barely clinging to life. The department had no facilities for large animal rescue. The nearest equine shelter was 3 counties away. I made a split-second decision that changed my life. I brought her home to my 5 acres of unused land inherited from my grandfather. I named her Hope, poured my savings into her recovery, and transformed my property into a sanctuary for animals nobody else would take. After 15 years wearing a badge, I'd seen the worst of humanity, but giving these animals a second chance helped restore my faith. My sanctuary now housed 27 animals, each with their own heartbreaking story. Shadow, a border collie mix, had been deliberately blinded by his previous owner. Despite everything humans had done to him, he became our most gentle therapy dog, visiting hospitals and nursing homes. His seizure medication kept him stable, medication he should have received 30 minutes ago. In the largest stall lived Apollo, a once magnificent stallion we rescued from a hoarder who'd kept 30 horses in a space meant for 5. His ribs still showed despite months of proper feeding. Next to him were the twin foals, Maple and River, born on my property after their pregnant mother was abandoned in a flash flood. My most recent rescue, a German shepherd named Valor, suffered from severe PTSD after being used as a bait dog in fights. He still flinched at sudden movements and loud noises. Keeping his environment calm and predictable was crucial to his recovery. Each animal's healing was carefully documented as evidence against their former abusers. This wasn't just a hobby, it was an extension of my oath to protect the vulnerable in Riverdale County. As I turned onto the gravel road leading to my property, I could already see unfamiliar vehicles parked outside the gates. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Karen Williams had no idea what she was interfering with, or who she was about to face. I screeched to a halt in front of my property, dust billowing around my county sheriff's vehicle. The scene before me made my jaw clench. 3 heavy-duty padlocks secured the main entrance gates. A white SUV with County Health Department magnetically attached to the door was parked nearby, alongside a luxury Mercedes I recognized as Karen's. Jamie rushed over as I stepped out. "They're still inside walking the property. That woman keeps taking pictures and pointing at things." I nodded, keeping my voice calm despite my rising anger. "Did they show any official documentation?" "They had papers with county letterhead, but wouldn't let me look closely," Jamie said, running a hand through her hair. "Mike, I can hear Valor howling. He hasn't sounded like that since we rescued him." The distressed cries of my German shepherd with PTSD carried across the property. My training as an officer was the only thing keeping me from breaking those locks immediately. I spotted them then, 3 figures emerging from the barn area. 2 men in what appeared to be official uniforms, and between them, Karen Williams in her designer pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, her blonde bob perfectly styled despite the dusty surroundings. "Sheriff Townsend," Karen called with mock surprise, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "What a coincidence. We were just discussing your hobby here." "There's no coincidence, Ms. Williams. This is my property you've illegally entered and locked down." I kept my tone professional, though inside I was seething. "Who authorized this inspection?" One of the men stepped forward, handing me a document. "County Health Department, sir. We've received multiple complaints about odor, noise, and potential disease vectors. We're authorized to shut down operations pending a full investigation." I examined the paperwork carefully. After 12 years as sheriff, I knew every department head's signature in the county. This one was wrong, close, but definitely forged. The inspection authorization number followed an outdated format we hadn't used in 3 years. "May I see your identification?" I asked, already knowing what I'd find. The men exchanged glances before reluctantly producing badges. They looked official at first glance, but lacked the holographic security features of authentic county ID. "Interesting," I said, pulling out my phone and snapping pictures of their credentials. "Because I had dispatch contact County Health while I was driving here. They have no record of any inspections scheduled for this address today." Karen's smug expression faltered slightly. "These gentlemen work for a specialized division. Obviously your regular channels wouldn't be informed." "There is no specialized division, Ms. Williams." I stepped closer, making sure she could clearly see the sheriff's badge on my chest. "And impersonating county officials is a felony offense in this state." The color drained from Karen's face as reality began to sink in. She took a step back, nearly stumbling on the uneven ground her designer heels weren't meant for. "These men are legitimate inspectors," she insisted, voice losing its earlier confidence. "I filed complaints weeks ago about the smell and noise affecting our property values. The nearest house in your development is half a mile away," I responded calmly. "And any legitimate complaint would come through my office first since this property falls under agricultural zoning regulations, not your HOA jurisdiction." The 2 fake inspectors began inching toward their vehicle, sensing trouble. I turned to them, my hand casually resting near my service weapon. "I wouldn't leave just yet, gentlemen. My deputies are already on their way, and fleeing would only add charges." On cue, 2 patrol cars pulled up, Deputies Martinez and Wilson stepping out with hands resting on their belts. "Sheriff, what's the situation?" Martinez asked, eyeing the scene professionally. "Suspected fraud in criminal trespass," I replied. "Secure these individuals while I check on the animals." Karen's composure completely crumbled. "This is ridiculous. I am the president of Whispering Pines HOA. You can't treat me like a common criminal." I approached one of the padlocks with the key from my pocket. These were my own locks, meaning Karen and her hired men had replaced my existing security with theirs to keep me out of my own property. "Ms. Williams, falsifying county documents, hiring individuals to impersonate government officials, and endangering animal welfare are serious offenses," I explained while unlocking the gate. "Not to mention breaking and entering, tampering with private property, and potential animal cruelty charges if any animals suffered under your actions." As the gate swung open, Valor's distressed howls grew louder. Shadow would be due for his medication within minutes. The severity of what Karen had done hit me anew. This wasn't just about property rights. These animals could have died if I hadn't arrived when I did. "Martinez, please read them their rights while I assess the situation inside." "Wilson, call the real county health department and animal services. I want official documentation of the animal's condition." Karen's indignant protests faded behind me as I hurried inside. Jamie followed, already pulling out Shadow's medication from the emergency kit we kept. "The water's been shut off," Jamie reported, pointing to the main valve that had been closed. They must have done it deliberately. Anger surged through me, but I pushed it aside. The animals needed me calm and focused right now. Get the water back on and check the horses, I instructed. I'll see to Valor in shadow. I found the German Shepherd curled in the corner of his enclosure, trembling violently. Familiar faces and routines were essential to his recovery, and strangers invading his safe space had triggered his trauma. Shadow lay nearby, quieter but clearly distressed, his blind eyes moving anxiously as he tried to make sense of the unfamiliar scents and sounds. "It's okay, boys," I soothed, slowly entering with treats in hand. "I'm here now. You're safe." Outside, I could hear Karen's voice rising in pitch as reality set in. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life, and she had done it to the worst possible person in the county. I spent the next hour tending to the animals, documenting their condition with photographs and video. Deputy Wilson escorted the real county veterinarian around the property as she assessed each animal. Shadow seemed groggy after receiving his delayed medication, while Valor remained hidden in his shelter, still trembling from the stress. "All things considered, they're in good shape," Dr. Marquez confirmed, making notes on her tablet. "Though that German Shepherd has definitely experienced a setback in his rehabilitation. The blind dog might need monitoring tonight to make sure the delayed medication doesn't cause complications." I nodded grimly, watching as Jamie refilled water troughs. "I want everything documented for the case file. Weight, vital signs, behavioral observations, everything." Outside the gate, Karen sat in the back of a patrol car, her perfect hair now disheveled as she gestured wildly, still arguing with Deputy Martinez. The two fake inspectors were handcuffed beside separate vehicles, looking considerably less official without their counterfeit badges. My phone rang, Judge Eleanor Ramirez, returning my earlier call. "Sheriff Townsend, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence you sent. This is quite disturbing," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Judge Ramirez was known for her strict sentencing in animal welfare cases. "Yes, Your Honor. We've confirmed the documentation was falsified. The inspectors were actually private security hired by Ms. Williams, and they deliberately shut off water to the animals." "I'm signing the emergency order now," she replied. "And Sheriff? I want this case personally. Don't let it get pleaded down." "Understood, Your Honor." By late afternoon, the real county officials had completed their inspection not of my sanctuary, but of the illegal actions taken against it. The property passed with flying colors, with inspectors noting the excellent care and detailed medical records kept for each animal. I approached Karen's patrol car, dismissing Martinez with a nod. Opening the door, I slid into the driver's seat, turning to face her through the partition. "Ms. Williams, before we head to the station for processing, I wanted to explain exactly what you've done," I said calmly. Her mascara had smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes, but defiance still flashed across her face. "This is all a misunderstanding. The HOA has clear guidelines about." "The HOA has zero authority over my property," I interrupted. "But that's actually the least of your concerns right now." I pulled out my phone, showing her photos of each animal, explaining their backgrounds one by one. "That blind dog you prevented from receiving medication? He's part of the County Victim Services Program, helping children testify in abuse cases." I swiped to the next photo. "Those horses? Evidence in an ongoing criminal case against a trafficking ring. That German Shepherd with PTSD? He's scheduled to begin training as a police K9 once his rehabilitation is complete." Her face paled with each revelation. "You didn't just target a private citizen's hobby, Ms. Williams. You interfered with official county programs, tampered with evidence, and jeopardized ongoing criminal investigations. Judge Ramirez has personally requested your case." "Judge Ramirez?" Karen whispered, recognition dawning in her eyes. The judge's reputation preceded her. "She's particularly interested in the water valve you ordered shut off," I added, watching realization spread across Karen's face like a stain. "Deliberate animal endangerment carries significant penalties in this county." For the first time since I'd met her, Karen Williams was completely speechless. Sometimes justice arrives in unexpected ways, I thought, as I signaled Martinez to transport her to booking. As Karen was driven away, I pulled out my phone and called District Attorney Helena Chen. Her response was immediate and forceful. Falsified county documents? Impersonating officials? Animal endangerment? I want the full package of charges, Sheriff, she said, her voice sharp with professional indignation. Send me everything you've got, photos, statements, documentation. You'll have it within the hour, I promised. The judge is already involved. Good. I'll make sure the arraignment happens first thing tomorrow. After hanging up, I turned my attention to the two men who had posed as inspectors. They sat handcuffed in separate patrol cars, looking considerably less confident than earlier. I approached the first one, younger, probably mid-30s, with a military-style haircut. Let's make this simple, I said, leaning against the car door. Who hired you? We work for Apex Security, he admitted, avoiding my eyes. Ms. Williams contracted us for what she called official county business. She provided the uniforms and badges. Did you know impersonating county officials carries a minimum 2-year sentence? I asked casually. His face went pale. She said she had authorization from the county manager. Said it was a public health emergency that needed immediate action. And you didn't verify this with the actual county offices? He swallowed hard. No, sir. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice level. Your cooperation now determines whether you face the maximum penalties or not. I need a full statement detailing exactly what Ms. Williams instructed you to do. Both men proved eager to cooperate, providing statements that corroborated each other. Karen had hired them specifically because I was scheduled for duty today. She provided fake documents, counterfeit badges, and explicit instructions to shut off utilities to the animals. By evening, the sanctuary was back to normal operations, though several animals remained distressed. I spent the night in the barn office, monitoring Shadow and keeping an eye on Valor, whose trust had been severely damaged by the day's events. The next morning, I dressed in my formal uniform for Karen's arraignment. When I entered the courtroom, I was surprised to see every seat filled. Word had spread quickly through our small community, and animal lovers had turned out in force. Karen looked nothing like the confident HOA president from yesterday. Her designer outfit had been replaced by standard jail attire, her perfectly styled hair now flat and lifeless. When Judge Ramirez entered, the courtroom fell silent. Catherine Williams, the judge began, her voice carrying clearly, you are charged with multiple felonies, including document forgery, impersonation of county officials, breaking and entering, property tampering, and animal endangerment. How do you plead? Karen's expensive attorney stepped forward. Not guilty, Your Honor. My client was acting within her capacity as HOA president to address community concerns. Judge Ramirez's expression hardened. I've reviewed the evidence, Counselor. Your client has zero jurisdiction over Sheriff Townsend's property. Furthermore, she deliberately falsified county documents and hired individuals to impersonate officials. Bail is set at $150,000. The gavel came down with finality, and Karen shot me a venomous look as she was led away. Her attorney approached me outside the courtroom. Sheriff, my client is prepared to make restitution for any inconvenience. Perhaps we could resolve this matter without a trial? The HOA would be willing to formally apologize. I looked at him steadily. Inconvenience? Your client deliberately endangered animals under my care and interfered with county programs. This isn't about an apology or restitution. This is about justice. Summer turned to fall as Karen's case moved through the legal system. Her attorney tried every delay tactic imaginable, but with each hearing, her position weakened. The evidence was overwhelming, including text messages recovered from her phone revealing her true motives. Once we force that animal hoarder out, his property will be perfect for our clubhouse expansion. The sanctuary lowers property values. Get rid of it and our investments double. The sheriff is on duty today. Perfect timing to shut it down. These messages, combined with testimony from the security guards and falsified documents, left her defense crumbling. News of the case spread beyond our county borders, drawing attention from state media and animal welfare organizations. 3 months after her initial arrest, Karen finally agreed to a plea deal, but Judge Ramirez wasn't feeling generous. "Ms. Williams," the judge declared during the sentencing hearing, "your actions were not merely misguided. They were calculated, malicious, and showed a blatant disregard for both the law and the welfare of innocent animals." The courtroom remained silent as Judge Ramirez continued. "I hereby sentence you to 8 months in county jail, a $25,000 fine payable to the County Animal Welfare Fund, and 500 hours of community service to be served at Sheriff Townsend's Animal Sanctuary upon your release." Karen gasped audibly. "Your Honor, I can't possibly." "You most certainly can and will," Judge Ramirez interrupted firmly. "Perhaps spending time caring for the animals you endangered will teach you the compassion you clearly lack." As Karen was led away, her face ashen with shock, I felt no satisfaction, only relief that justice had been served and my animals were safe. The unexpected outcome of this ordeal was the outpouring of community support. The media coverage had shined a spotlight on my sanctuary's work with rescue animals and their role in therapy programs. Donations poured in, along with volunteer applications and offers of professional services. Local businesses sponsored individual animals. The veterinary school at the state university established a partnership program, sending students for training rotations. A prominent architect offered to design expanded facilities pro bono. What Karen had intended as my sanctuary's end became its transformation. 6 months later, I stood watching as construction crews finished the new rehabilitation center. The expanded facility would allow us to help twice as many animals and develop additional therapy programs for victims of abuse and trauma. "Sheriff Townsend?" I turned to find a young woman holding a camera, notebook in hand. "I'm Alicia from the County Chronicle. Would you mind answering a few questions about the sanctuary's grand reopening next week?" "Not at all," I replied, leading her toward the new facilities. "Everyone's talking about how the sanctuary has grown since the HOA incident," she said, glancing at her notes. "Did you ever expect something so positive to come from such a negative situation?" I paused, looking out over the property where Valor was now cautiously playing with other dogs, progress that had seemed impossible during his early days of trauma. "Sometimes justice works in unexpected ways," I told her. Karen thought she was shutting down just another property nuisance. She never bothered to check who she was dealing with or what really happens here. "And next month she starts her community service here, correct?" Alicia asked. I nodded, a slight smile forming. 500 hours of cleaning stalls, preparing meals, and learning exactly what these animals mean to our community. Judge Ramirez was quite specific about that part of the sentence. "Are you concerned about having her work here after what she did?" "Not at all," I replied confidently. "The animals teach compassion better than any human could. That's the whole point of what we do here." As if on cue, Shadow, our blind therapy dog, approached with his gentle, steady gait, pressing his head against my hand for attention. "This is Sheriff Townsend's Animal Sanctuary," I said, kneeling to stroke Shadow's head. "But the animals are the real heroes here. They're the ones doing the healing." Karen Williams had made one critical mistake. She hadn't just taken on a hobby farmer or an animal enthusiast. She challenged a county sheriff who understood both justice and compassion, and in the end, both would be served. The day of our sanctuary's grand reopening arrived with perfect fall weather, crisp air, golden sunlight, and trees painted in brilliant autumn colors. What had once been my private rescue operation was now officially Townsend County Animal Rehabilitation and Therapy Center, complete with proper signage and a parking area for visitors. Over 200 people gathered for the ceremony. County officials, local families, media representatives, and even a state senator all came to celebrate. The mayor cut a blue ribbon stretched across our new entrance, cameras flashed, and applause echoed across the property. "If you'll all follow me," I announced to the crowd, "I'd like to show you what your support has created." I led visitors through the expanded facilities, modern stables with spacious stalls, an indoor therapy arena, veterinary treatment rooms, and specialized rehabilitation areas. Children pressed their faces against safe viewing windows, delighted by the resident animals who had become local celebrities through news coverage of Karen's case. "And this," I said, stopping at a sunlit room filled with comfortable chairs and calming decor, "is the Shadow Room, named after our blind therapy dog. Shadow himself lay contentedly on a cushion, his tail thumping as visitors entered. A plaque on the wall explained his purpose. In this space, therapy animals help children find their voices when testifying about abuse, trauma, or neglect. Dr. Marquez, the county veterinarian who had documented the animal's condition on that fateful day, stood nearby. Sheriff Townsend's sanctuary has revolutionized how we handle animal evidence in abuse cases, she explained to the visitors. Instead of simply photographing injured animals and then euthanizing them or leaving them in cages during lengthy court proceedings, we rehabilitate them here. They become living testimony to both cruelty and recovery. Judge Ramirez arrived late but made her presence known immediately. She became one of our strongest advocates since Karen's case, helping secure county funding and legal protections for our programs. "Where's Valor?" she asked me quietly. "I've been following his progress reports." I guided her to a separate exercise yard where our once traumatized German Shepherd was cautiously interacting with a trainer. Though still nervous around strangers, he no longer hid or trembled uncontrollably. "He's being evaluated for canine training next month," I told her. "His past trauma actually makes him uniquely sensitive to human emotions." The training director thinks he could be exceptional at detecting victims in search and rescue situations. The judge nodded approvingly. "Life's strange, isn't it? Karen's cruelty could have destroyed him, but instead, he's becoming something remarkable." After the official tours ended and most visitors departed, I found myself alone in the new observation deck overlooking the pasture where our rescued horses grazed peacefully. Hope, that first skeletal horse who had started it all, was now our eldest resident, her once protruding ribs covered by a healthy coat that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Deputy Martinez joined me, leaning against the railing. "Quite a transformation, Mike. From your grandfather's old property to all this." "Sometimes the worst actions bring out the best responses," I replied. "Speaking of worst actions," Martinez said with a half-smile, "I just dropped off our special community service volunteer at the orientation room. She looks thrilled to be here." Karen Williams had arrived to begin her 500 hours, exactly 7 months after she'd tried to destroy this place. I found her sitting stiffly in our volunteer orientation room, dressed in clothes far too expensive for the work ahead. The ankle monitor on her right leg peeked out from designer jeans, a condition of her release from jail just 2 days earlier. "Ms. Williams," I acknowledged, taking a seat across from her. "Welcome to your first day." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Let's be clear, Sheriff. I'm only here because I have no choice." "That's fine," I replied calmly. "Intentions matter less than actions. You'll start with basic care duties, feeding, watering, and cleaning stalls." I handed her a schedule and a volunteer manual. "You'll work directly with Jamie, who you met during your last visit. The rehabilitation specialist will determine when you're ready to work directly with the animals." "For how long?" she asked, glancing at the thick manual. "Until you've completed your 500 hours or until you demonstrate genuine understanding of what these animals need." Judge's orders. Karen's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. As I walked her to the supply room for proper work attire, we passed Shadow's therapy room. Inside, a small girl sat on the floor beside the blind dog, her hand resting on his fur while she whispered something to a counselor. The child had been a key witness in a domestic violence case last month, too frightened to speak until Shadow had been brought in. "That's what you tried to destroy," I said quietly, nodding toward the scene. "Not just animals, but healing." Something flickered across Karen's face, perhaps the first crack in her armor of entitlement and indifference. It was too soon to tell if Judge Ramirez's unique sentence would transform Karen as it had transformed my sanctuary, but watching that small moment of realization, I allowed myself to hope. After all, hope was what this place was built on, from that first rescued horse to the hundreds of animals and people who would find healing here in the years to come. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. Sometimes, it's about transformation. Karen had unwittingly set in motion the sanctuary's greatest chapter yet, all because she never bothered to check who she was really dealing with. The county sheriff who had sworn to protect all the vulnerable creatures in his care, whether they walked on 2 legs or 4. As winter settled over the county, transforming the sanctuary grounds with a pristine blanket of snow, I found myself reflecting on the 6 months that had passed since our grand reopening. The morning sun cast long shadows across the property as I made my early rounds, checking on our residents before the day's activities began. Karen Williams had completed nearly 300 of her 500 community service hours, and something unexpected was happening. The change had been almost imperceptible at first, a moment of genuine concern when one of the rescue horses fell ill, a question about Shadow's medication that wasn't just perfunctory, small conversations with the children who visited for therapy sessions. I watched her from my office window as she meticulously cleaned out Apollo's stall, taking care not to startle the still skittish stallion. Her designer clothes had long since been replaced by practical workwear, her manicured nails now trimmed short and often lined with dirt despite the gloves she wore. Jamie approached me, coffee mug in hand. "She's different with Valor," she observed, following my gaze. "Have you noticed?" I nodded. Valor, our PTSD-affected German Shepherd, had initially refused to go near Karen, sensing the tension and anger she carried. Now, he cautiously accepted treats from her hand, though still keeping his distance. "The judge knew what she was doing," I replied. 500 hours is long enough to either harden someone completely or break through their defenses. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from the president of Whispering Pines HOA, the position Karen had once held with such iron authority. "Sheriff Townsend, this is Thomas Mercer. Our board has been discussing the situation with Ms. Williams and your sanctuary." I braced myself for more conflict. "Yes, Mr. Mercer? We want to make amends," he said, surprising me. "Karen's actions were unconscionable and never authorized by the full board. We've voted unanimously to establish an annual donation to your sanctuary's operations and to create a partnership for educational programs about animal welfare." This was unexpected. "I appreciate that, Mr. Mercer. It would mean a lot to the program. There's more," he continued. "We're changing our community guidelines to actively support wildlife and domestic animal welfare. We'd like your input on the new policies." After hanging up, I walked through the sanctuary grounds, stopping to check on a new arrival, a severely neglected St. Bernard we'd rescued from an abandoned property last week. The massive dog cowered in the corner of his enclosure, eyes wary of human approach after years of mistreatment. To my surprise, I found Karen sitting quietly outside his enclosure, simply reading aloud from a book. She looked up as I approached. "Jamie said he needs to get used to human voices without feeling threatened," she explained, almost defensively. "I've been reading to him during my breaks." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "That's good thinking. Consistency helps build trust." An awkward silence stretched between us before Karen spoke again, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Why did you start this place?" "Really?" she asked, closing her book. "It's clearly more than just a hobby." I considered deflecting the question, but something in her expression seemed genuinely curious rather than antagonistic. "That first horse, Hope, showed me something I needed to see," I answered honestly. After 15 years of law enforcement, I was becoming numb to suffering. Focused on punishing perpetrators instead of healing victims. I glanced at the St. Bernard, who was watching our interaction cautiously. Hope reminded me why I became a sheriff in the first place. To protect those who can't protect themselves. Karen looked down at her hands. "I never saw animals that way. They were just property. Noisy, messy property that affected real estate values." "And now?" I prompted. She gestured toward the therapy arena where Shadow was working with a group of children. "I've watched what that blind dog does for traumatized kids. How he seems to know exactly who needs him most." She paused. "It's hard to see that and still think of them as just property." It wasn't an apology or a complete transformation, but it was something, a crack in the foundation of indifference that had led to her actions against the sanctuary. The following week brought the biggest snowstorm of the season. Roads were closed, and I stayed overnight at the sanctuary to ensure the animals received proper care. To my surprise, Karen called Jamie asking for permission to come help, trudging through knee-deep snow from the nearest plowed road to assist with feeding and keeping the water sources from freezing. We worked side by side in the howling wind, our breath forming clouds in the frigid air. When we finally finished and retreated to the main building for warmth, I made 2 cups of coffee without asking. "Thank you," she said simply, accepting the steaming mug. "Not just for this. For not making these hours more miserable than they need to be. You had every right to." I studied her face, noticing for the first time how the hardness in her eyes had softened. "That's not why the judge sent you here," I replied. "Punishment wasn't the point. Understanding was." Karen gazed out the window at the snow-covered sanctuary. "I think I'm starting to." As spring thawed the winter's frost, bringing new life to the sanctuary, Karen completed her final community service hours. On her last day, the staff organized a small gathering to recognize the work she'd done, standard practice for all volunteers, though this case was anything but standard. To everyone's surprise, Karen arrived with her attorney and a sealed envelope, which she handed to me with uncharacteristic hesitation. "What's this?" I asked, suspicious despite the changes I'd witnessed. "Open it," she replied. Inside was a legal document, a donation of 10 acres of land adjacent to the sanctuary. Property that Karen personally owned, which she had once planned to develop into luxury homes. "It's not enough to make up for what I did," she said quietly as murmurs spread through the gathered staff. "But it's a start. The land has a natural spring that would be perfect for the water therapy program Jamie mentioned for the injured horses." I looked at her, genuinely speechless for perhaps the first time in our complicated history. Karen Williams, the woman who had once hired fake inspectors to shut down my sanctuary, who had endangered the lives of vulnerable animals out of arrogance and greed, stood before me transformed. Not completely, perhaps. I had no illusions that 500 hours had erased a lifetime of entitlement. But meaningfully, undeniably changed. "The judge was right," she said, a rueful smile touching her lips. "I needed to understand what this place really means. What these animals do. I just wish it hadn't taken a criminal sentence to open my eyes." As she turned to leave, Shadow approached her, something he had rarely done voluntarily before. The blind therapy dog pressed gently against her leg, his tail wagging slowly. Karen knelt down, carefully running her hand along his back. "You were the first one I wronged," she whispered to him. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see you." In that moment, watching the woman who had once been my greatest adversary finding connection with a dog who had overcome his own trauma, I understood something profound about justice. True justice isn't when the guilty are punished. It's when they're transformed. Karen Williams had sent fake inspectors to shut down my sanctuary, unaware I was the county sheriff. In doing so, she had unleashed consequences she never imagined, not just legal penalties, but a journey that forced her to confront the very compassion she had dismissed. And in an unexpected twist of fate, the woman who had once tried to destroy this place of healing had now become part of its legacy.